I am pro-choice, but I am not pro-abortion. I'm not someone who dismisses a fetus as not having any worth. I'm someone who firmly believes that the United States has far too many abortions, and we should all be focused on significantly reducing the amount of unwanted pregnancies. Fortunately, that overall number has been decreasing. I believe this reflects the ideology of most people. We are pro-choice, but we're not represented by the far left. We're deeply put off by people with this seemingly thoughtless and heartless attitude towards potential life decisions and traumatic procedures. In 2015, 638,169 legal induced abortions were reported to the Center of Disease Control from 49 reporting areas. 93,096 were in New York, which accounted for 14.6% of all abortions in the United States. 28.2% of pregnancies in that state end in abortion. With those kind of statistics, you would think the people running New York would be desperate to lower those staggering abortion numbers. You would think they'd be embarrassed, but apparently not. They passed a bill making abortion even less restrictive than it already was. Abortion is legal to 24 weeks, and even afterwards with vague language around if a woman's health was affected. The bill begins with, every individual has the fundamental right to choose or refuse contraception or sterilization. This takes away any accountability. What about a man who's impregnated 9 women out of wedlock? What about a woman who's a drug addict that continues to have crack babies at the expense of the community? There should be no legal liability in these instances? Why not begin with, every individual has the fundamental right to be educated and have access to contraception. Every individual has the fundamental right to use contraception responsibly in order to reduce the number of unwanted pregnancies as much as humanly possible. When mistakes happen, a woman has fundamental rights regarding their pregnancy. And then introduce the next line of the bill, which is, every individual who becomes pregnant has the fundamental right to choose to carry the pregnancy to term, to give birth to a child, or to have an abortion pursuant to this article. This bill also removes criminal liability around abortion by keeping a fetus out of the definition of being a person. According to the bill, person, when referring to the victim of a homicide, means a human being who has been born and is alive. But this definition ignores fetal viability, which is estimated at 24 weeks. This doesn't mean the fetus will survive outside the womb this early, but has over a 50% chance. And what about someone who physically assaults a pregnant woman, causing her to lose the fetus? There shouldn't be any additional punishment in those cases? It doesn't matter? The justification of the bill includes the following. In 1970, New York legalized abortion in some circumstances, thereby recognizing that a woman has a fundamental right to make medical decisions about the course of a pregnancy. 3 years later, the Supreme Court of the United States issued a landmark decision in Roe v. Wade, holding that this fundamental right is protected by the United States Constitution. During the decades since Roe v. Wade was decided, there have been numerous court decisions clarifying the scope of the right to abortion, but unfortunately New York's laws have remained outdated. It doesn't say which ones specifically, and that's extremely vague language. Furthermore, it is clear that some provisions of New York law are unconstitutional and have proved burdensome to women seeking to assert their constitutionally protected right to an abortion. If it's really burdensome to women, then why do so many women in New York have an abortion? And in New York City, there's no waiting period. There's no minor doesn't need to notify their guardians or their parents. So there's actually not many restrictions at all, actually less restrictions in most other states. So the argument that the existing laws are somehow burdensome just aren't backed up by the statistics. It goes on. This bill updates New York's abortion statutes to address constitutional flaws in our laws and recognize a woman's fundamental right to access safe, legal, abortion. Once again, very vague language addressed constitutional flaws. Like what? This kind of vague language could basically be used to justify anything. Just pass anything you want and say you're doing it because the currently laws are outdated and there's constitutional flaws, without being specific as to exactly what those are. This law was passed with the sound of applause. Apparently working hard to increase the number of abortions in your state is worth celebrating. Creepy.